I think we are live. Welcome everyone around the world. This is John Raymer, privileged and blessed to be a part of your MLK Weekend of Service as we get ready for the day of service. 30 years ago, AmeriCorps began, and this year actually is going to be Dr. King's 95th birthday. And tomorrow, which is the day of service, happens to be his birthday, and there'll be a special celebration happening. But that's tomorrow. Let's turn to today. And it's an honor to have you, Jonathan. Thank you for making time for this. And I could say a lot about you, but I want to say a little bit about you just so people know that Jonathan's passion for human security is in his home at the Global Security Institute. He's also a representative of the UN, the World Summits of Nobel Peace Laureates. He's an international lawyer, former professor of international law. He won the Lifetime Achievement Award for the International Law Section of the American Bar Association and senior advisor to its Committee on National Security. And he's a fellow and trustee of the World Academy of the Arts and Science and a recipient of numerous awards. So he's also a screenwriter, and he's just brilliant, like I said. And I'm blessed to have you here, brother. So I'm going to turn it over to you. What we talked about doing is that after you share with us your thinking, we're going to also have a little time for a breakout, give people a chance to talk to each other about exactly the theme that you chose for this conversation, which is, well, how are we going to act? How do we know and act today? And what can we learn from the words of Dr. Martin Luther King? So Jonathan, I turn it over to you.
John, thank you for bringing lives, hearts, and minds together all over the world on the principle of service, love, and virtue. Nothing could be more important right now. You know, it's interesting that as we honor at this moment Martin Luther King, in India, there's an honoring of a great Sufi saint from 800 years ago who came to that part of the subcontinent of that part of South Asia with the message, love toward all, malice toward none. And you can, if you study Mahatma Gandhi's message of human unity, in that culture, it goes right back to that particular saint. So right now, there's millions of people gathering in Ajmer, where the motto is love toward all, malice toward none. And that's essentially what we have to find within ourselves. Love toward all, malice toward none. And Martin Luther King demonstrated a brilliant way of bringing that into action. And I'm going to take this moment, this time that I have, mainly to share his words, but I want to give a little context in terms of his strategy and the way he acted to bring about dramatic social change. So let's give a context of the moment in which he received the Nobel Prize. And he says it perfectly. He began his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. I accept the Nobel Prize for Peace at a moment when 22 million Negroes of the United States of America are engaged in a creative battle to end the long night of racial injustice. I accept this award on behalf of a civil rights movement which is moving with determination and a majestic scorn for risk and danger to establish a reign of freedom and a rule of justice. I'm mindful that only yesterday in Birmingham, Alabama, our children crying out for brotherhood were answered with fire hoses, snarling dogs, and even death. I'm mindful that only yesterday in Philadelphia, Mississippi, young people seeking to secure the right to vote were brutalized and murdered. And only yesterday, more than 40 houses of worship in the state of Mississippi alone were bombed or burned because they offered a sanctuary to those who would not accept segregation. I'm mindful that debilitating and grinding poverty afflicts my people and chains them to the lowest rung of the economic ladder. Therefore, I must ask why this prize is awarded to a movement which is beleaguered and committed to unrelenting struggle, to a movement which has not won the very peace and brotherhood which is the essence of the Nobel Prize. The context of his moment in which he won the prize was a moment in which brutality was responding to a call of nonviolence and love, a brutality in which people died, a brutality in which people were jailed. And those hard won victories of the civil rights movement, those hard won victories in which the battle between absolute property rights, the right to own human beings, and the right to be a human being, in which the United States had a, around which the United States had a civil war, was not resolved in law until the civil rights legislation that he helped make happen in the 1960s. But the resolution of the injustice of racism has not been overcome yet. It's not been overcome globally, and it's not been overcome in the United States. Overcoming it has to begin, of course, in our hearts. But let's look at part of the strategy that Martin Luther King had in addressing it. First, he began with instances in which people could understand. Simply the injustice of not allowing people to go to a luncheonette and have a hamburger. Imagine that. People could not get served a hamburger and a Coca-Cola because that's what they were, the kind of things they were ordering. They weren't vegan quite then because of the color of their skin. And from that, being able to ride with dignity on a bus. From that, workers' rights. From that, addressing poverty. From that, addressing the immorality of the Vietnam War. From that, addressing the war machine and the international application of the threat of nuclear annihilation and ultimate violence. But in every step, rather than being diverted by identity politics, he stayed on principle. And the principle that he stayed on was love. The principle that he stayed on was the unity of the human family. The principle that he rested on was virtue. And the power that he brought to the table was courage and commitment. He never divided people based on race. He never divided people based on religion or age or class. What he did was he invited people who cared about being human to join what we have now. And that's the kind of leadership that we're lacking. Leadership that expands the tent, leadership that invites, leadership that sees our common humanity. And that's the message of today. And that's the transformation that we have to represent. So I want to rest my presentation on his words. I just wanted to give the context of how we should act is in a way that follows that we need strategy right now. We have siloed movements. The movement for nuclear disarmament is siloed from the movement for human rights. The movement for human rights is siloed from the movement for environmental justice. The movement for environmental justice is all too often siloed from the movement of climate protection. Justice, civil rights, human rights, peace, security, these are integrated issues that are all based on the principle of loving people and using things, not loving things and using people. And Martin Luther King exemplified a strategy, an effective strategy, that created change by focusing on those values, and the depth of his insights are what I want to share, because we have to have that kind of rootedness at this moment in history in which authoritarian fascist regimes, racist regimes are uh, are tremendously and effectively, I might add, challenging the basic principles for which he stands, which resonate in every open human heart. The 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 the, the policies that emerge out of divisiveness, fear, and lies. He speaks truth. He's grounded in truth. And interestingly, you'll hear that he understood there's a relationship between knowing truth and love in our hearts. And he in fact identifies that as one of the deepest insights of his life. That there's a relationship between the virtuous qualities of our hearts and the knowledge of reality that we have. So let me put my words aside and listen carefully to this is his Nobel lecture, a lecture that he gave the night before his Nobel acceptance speech. This evening, I'd like to use this lofty and historic platform to discuss what appears to me to be the most pressing problem confronting mankind today. Modern man has brought this whole world to an awe-inspiring threshold of the future. He has reached new and astonishing peaks of scientific success. He has produced machines that think, and it just think AI. I mean, this is 1964. He is timeless in his insight and wisdom, and astonishing peaks of scientific success. He's produced machines that think and instruments that peer into the unfathomable ranges of interstellar space. He's built gigantic bridges to span the seas, and gargantuan buildings to kiss the skies. His airplanes and spaceships have dwarfed distance, placed time in chains, and carved highways through the stratosphere. This is a dazzling picture of modern man's scientific and technological progress. Yet, in spite of these spectacular strides in science and technology, and still unlimited ones to come, something basic is missing. There's a sort of poverty of the spirit which stands in glaring contrast to our scientific and technological abundance. The richer we have become materially, the poorer we've become morally and spiritually. We've learned to fly the air like birds and swim the sea like fish, but we've not learned the simple art of living together as brothers. Every man lives in two realms, the internal and the external. And let me digress the gender issue here. It's clear that he meant everyone, but this is the language of the time. God willing, we've corrected that, and obviously living the simple living art, living together as human beings is what we would say today, and that was what he meant. We know that. The internal is that realm of spiritual ends expressed in art, literature, morals, and religion. The external is that complex of devices, techniques, and mechanisms and instrumentalities by means of which we live. Our problem today is that we've allowed the internal to become lost in the external. We've allowed the means by which we live to outdistance the ends for which we live. So much of modern life can be summarized in that arresting dictum of the poet Thoreau: improved means to an unimproved end. This is the serious predicament, the deep and haunting problem confronting modern man. If we are to survive today, our moral and spiritual lag must be eliminated. Enlarged material powers spell enlarged peril if there's not proportionate growth of the soul. When the without of man's nature subjugates the within, dark storm clouds begin to form in the world. Let me just digress a moment here. The best example of improved means to unimproved ends would be the nuclear arsenals. The more we improve the arsenal, the less security we obtain. It's the complete division not only between the internal from which our values emerge, but between the why and the how. When that why and the how are divided, we end up with art without beauty, law without justice, medicine without healing, religion without love and transcendence, philosophy without truth, financial systems without goods and services, and weapons without security. When the why, which is to find the meaning of life, which is the unity between the divine and the human, our harmony with all that the gift of our space and time together, when that's prominent, then all of these arts, the art of politics, the art of finance, the art of science, all become in service of that, and we flourish. This problem, back to Martin Luther King's clarity, this problem of spiritual and moral lag, which constitutes modern man's chief dilemma, expresses itself in three large problems which grow out of man's ethical infantilism. Each of these problems, while appearing to be separate and isolated, is inextricably bound together. I refer to racial injustice, poverty, and war. The first problem I'd like to mention is racial injustice. The struggle to eliminate the evil of racial injustice constitutes one of the major struggles of our time. Oppressed people can, I'm reading, it's a very long speech, so I'm going to jump into it. Oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. The yearning for freedom eventually manifests itself. The Bible tells this thrilling story of how Moses stood in Pharaoh's court centuries ago and said, "Let my people go." This is a kind of opening chapter in this continuing story. The present struggle in the United States is a later chapter in the same unfolding story. And Lord knows it is happening today in the streets of our nation, in which we have a political party following somebody who is basically saying, "Make America white again." That's what he means. Fortunately, remember it's the 1960s, some significant strides have been made in the struggle to end the long night of racial injustice. We've seen the magnificent drama of independence unfold, and look at his global perspective in Asia and Africa. Just 30 years ago, there were only 3 independent nations in the whole of Africa, but today 35 African nations have risen from colonial bondage. In the United States, we've witnessed the gradual demise of the system of racial segregation. Now, I want to digress. Recently, I had the privilege of speaking at the convention of the Interparliamentary Union in Luanda, Angola, and the leadership now of the Interparliamentary Union, which is the leadership of the world's parliaments, is a woman parliamentarian from Tanzania. When he spoke these words, Wangari Maathai, who won the Nobel Prize for the Green Belt movement, had not gotten her PhD. She's the first woman in East Africa to get her PhD. When she went to get her PhD, she was threatened. Her life was threatened for breaking out of the traditional oppression of women. And I can tell you, I was there at the Interparliamentary Union, and there were a lot of women parliamentarians from Africa and all over the developing world. That's a story of women standing up the world over and trying to balance the injustice of gender inequity on the planet. And that's a story that we will hear soon, because I'm telling you, I saw it. And there's countries in Africa now by legislation, like in Rwanda, that require gender equity in their parliaments. And I saw the leadership there. And that's a story that we haven't heard globally, but it's happening, and it will happen here in the United States too. It must. The Supreme Court's decision of 1954 outlawing segregation in the public schools gave a legal and constitutional death blow to the whole doctrine of separate but equal. The court decreed that separate facilities are inherently unequal, and that to segregate a child on the basis of race is to deny that child equal protection of law. Well, we've changed the law, but look at the difference between the quality of education in our inner city schools and our suburbs. We have a long way to go, in fact. This decision came as a beacon light of hope It's true, and we need to ride on it. Of hope to millions of disinherited people. Then came that glowing day of a few months ago when a strong civil rights bill became the law of the land. This bill, which was first recommended and promoted by President Kennedy, was passed because of the overwhelming support and perseverance of millions of Americans. But it's being challenged now. All the civil rights laws are being cut back by conservative Federalist Society judges. So the battle continues for us. It came as a bright interlude in the long and sometimes turbulent struggle for civil rights, the beginning of a second Emancipation Proclamation, providing a comprehensive legal basis for equality of opportunity. Since the passage of this bill, we've seen some encouraging and surprising signs of compliance. I'm happy to report that by and large, communities all over the southern part of the United States are obeying the civil rights law and showing remarkable good sense. It's true, progress has been made. Progress has been made, and we had a president of color with Barack Obama. But on the ground in our cities, there's a long way to go. Let me not leave you with a false impression. The problem is far from solved. We still have a long, long way to go before the dream of freedom is a reality for the Negro in the United States. To put it figuratively in biblical language, we've left the dusty soils of Egypt and crossed a Red Sea whose waters had for years been hardened by a long and piercing winter of massive resistance. But before we reach the majestic shores of the Promised Land, there is a frustrating, bewildering wilderness ahead. We must still face prodigious hilltops of opposition and gigantic mountains of resistance, but with patient and firm determination, we will press on until every valley of despair is exalted to new peaks of hope, until every mountain of pride and irrationality is made low by the leveling process of humility and compassion, until the rough places of injustice are transformed into a smooth plane of equality of opportunity, and until the crooked places of prejudice are transformed by the straightening process of bright eyed wisdom. Wisdom. What the main sections of the civil rights movement in the United States are saying is that the demand for dignity, equality, jobs, and citizenship will not be abandoned or diluted or postponed. If that means resistance and conflict, we shall not flinch. We shall not be cowed. We're no longer afraid. The word that symbolizes the spirit and the outward form of our encounter is nonviolence. And it is doubtless that factor which made it seem appropriate to award a Peace Prize to one identified with this struggle. Nonviolence has also meant that my people, in the agonizing struggle of recent years, have taken suffering upon themselves instead of inflicting it on others. It has meant, as I said, that we are no longer afraid and cowed. Let me just say the civil rights movement in the South was undoubtedly led by the people of color. But there were a lot of white folks that joined in and put their lives on the line and gave up their lives. I have one of my cousins, Sharon Wallace, was engaged in voter registration there in Mississippi, put her life on the line. Of course, she was threatened many times, and some people were killed. And that was really important to Martin Luther King, that the movement itself not be just a movement of people of color, but that it be a movement of all people um, for the recovery of our common humanity. That injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. But in some substantial degree, it has meant that we do not want to instill fear in others or into the society of which we're a part. The movement does not seek to liberate Negroes at the expense of the humiliation and enslavement of whites. It seeks no victory over anyone. It seeks to liberate American society and to share in the self-liberation of all people, all people. Violence as a way of achieving racial justice is both impractical and immoral. It's impractical because we don't have guns and we don't want to shoot people. Can't win that way. I'm not unmindful of the fact that violence often brings about momentary results. Nations have frequently won their independence in battle, but in spite of temporary victories, violence never brings permanent peace. It solves no social problem, it merely creates new and more complicated ones. Violence is impractical because it is a descending spiral ending in destruction for all. It is immoral because it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather than win his understanding. It seeks to annihilate rather than convert. Violence is immoral because it thrives on hatred rather than love. It destroys community and makes brotherhood impossible. It leaves society in monologue rather than dialogue. Violence ends up defeating itself. It creates bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers. In a real sense, nonviolence seeks to redeem the spiritual and moral lag that I spoke of earlier as the chief dilemma of modern man. It seeks to secure moral ends through moral means. Nonviolence is a powerful and just weapon. Indeed, it is a weapon unique in history, which cuts without wounding and ennobles the man who wields it. I'll make no comment about the struggle for self defense in the Ukraine, the fight against Nazism. It's a little more nuanced, but the uh, the intention and the focus and the use of nonviolence and the being of nonviolence has to be our core value in all circumstances. But when people are defending for their lives against brutal oppression, there may be exceptions. I just want to put that in. And he also was kind of nuanced about that, but he spoke out vigorously against the Vietnam War because it was a war of violence that our country mistakenly engaged in. The nonviolent resistors can summarize their message in the following simple terms. We will take direct action against injustice despite the failure of governmental and other official agencies to act first. We will not obey unjust laws or submit to unjust practices. We will do this peacefully, openly, and cheerfully because our aim is to persuade. We adopt the means of nonviolence because our end is a community at peace with itself. We will try to persuade with our words, but if our words fail, we will try to persuade with our acts. We will always be willing to talk and seek fair compromise, but we are ready to suffer when necessary and even risk our lives to become witnesses to truth as we see it. In the past 10 years, unarmed, gallant men and women of the United States have given living testimony to the moral power and efficiency of nonviolence. By thousands, faceless, anonymous, relentless young people, black and white, have temporarily left the ivory towers of learning for the barricades of bias. Their courageous and disciplined activities has come as a refreshing oasis in a desert sweltering with the heat of injustice. They've taken our whole nation back to those great wells of democracy, which were dug by the founding fathers in the formulation of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. One day, all of America will be proud of their achievements. And that's why it's wonderful that we're celebrating Martin Luther King taking pride in the achievement of the power of nonviolent social change. A second evil which plagues the modern world is that of poverty. Like a monstrous octopus, it projects its nagging, prehensile tentacles in lands and villages all over the world. Almost two-thirds of the peoples of the world go to bed hungry at night. We've reduced that to less than a third today, but it's still insufferably, it's insufferably um, huge. it's huge. It's in the billions of people. And the poverty that we're referring to is where there is a complete disconnect by how hard a person works, how much a person works, and the capacity to change their circumstances. And as we speak today, there are mothers who have to decide which one of their children are going to live tomorrow because they don't have enough food for all of them. There are millions and millions of people, well, no, actually, it's in the billions, who don't have safe potable water. They're undernourished, ill-housed, and shabbily clad. Many of them have no houses or beds to sleep in. Their only beds are the sidewalks of the cities and dusty roads of villages. Most of these poverty-stricken children of God have never seen a physician or a dentist. This problem of poverty is not only seen in class division between the highly developed industrial nations and the so-called underdeveloped nations, it's seen in the great economic gap within the rich nations themselves. Take my own country, for example. We've developed the greatest system of production that history's ever known. We've become the richest nation in the world. Our national gross product this year will reach astounding figures, yet at least one-fifth of our fellow citizens are bound to a miserable culture of poverty. In a sense, the poverty of the poor in America is more frustrating than the poverty elsewhere, Africa and Asia. The misery of the poor in Africa and Asia is shared misery, a fact of life for the vast majority. They're all poor together as a result of years of exploitation, I would say colonialism and underdevelopment. In sad contrast, the poor in America know they live in the richest country in the world, and that even though they are perishing on a lonely island of poverty, they're surrounded by a vast ocean of material prosperity. Glistening towers of glass and steel, easily seen from their slum dwellings, spring up overnight. Jetliners speed over the ghettos at 600 miles an hour, satellites streak through outer space. So it is obvious that if man is to redeem his spiritual and moral lag, he must go all out to bridge the social and economic gulf between the haves and have-nots. There's nothing new about poverty. What is new, however, is that today we have the resources, and I would say the technological, economic, and social skills to get rid of it. More than a century and a half ago, people began to be disturbed about the twin problems of population and production. It turns out, however, that we have more than enough capacity, and now I'm speaking, not quoting him. We have more than enough capacity. The military budgets of the world are presently hovering over $2 trillion a year. The United States military budget is around a trillion alone. A small portion of this could ensure that every single child on the planet has health care, has decent food and shelter. So this is a choice. This is a choice. And Martin Luther King says, the time has come for an all-out world war against poverty. The rich nations must use their vast resources of wealth to develop the underdeveloped, school the unschooled, and feed the unfed. Ultimately, a great nation is a compassionate nation. No individual or nation can be great if it does not have a concern for the least of these. Deeply etched in the fiber of our religious traditions is the conviction that men and women are made in the image of God and that they are souls of infinite metaphysical value, the heirs of a legacy of dignity and worth. If we feel this as a profound moral fact, we cannot be content to see people hungry, to see people victimized with starvation and ill health. When we have the means to help them, the wealthy nations must go all out to bridge the gulf between the rich minority and the poor majority. In the final analysis, the rich must not ignore the poor because both rich and poor are tied in a single garment of destiny. All life is interrelated, and all humans are interdependent. The agony of the poor diminishes the rich, and the salvation of the poor enlarges the rich. We are inevitably our brother's keepers because of the interrelated structure of reality. Reality is that we are interconnected, not only as a human family, but we're interconnected with the lives of the natural world, the entire web of life, and the war against nature has to stop. A third great evil confronting our world is that of war. Now remember, he's rooting this in the failure of the internal development in preference to the excessive development of the external. And I would say that our war with nature is because we're not connected with the nature within ourselves. We're not connected with what makes us human, which is our connection is through the heart. Every leaf on a tree has just a thin connection to the tree, but it is connected to the tree. It has to be. And our connection to what makes us human is through the stem of the heart. And you'll hear him go to this. Recent events have vividly reminded us that nations are not reducing, but rather increasing their arsenals of weapons of mass destruction. The best brains in the highly developed nations of the world are devoted to military technology. The proliferation of nuclear weapons has not been halted in spite of the limited test ban treaty. On the contrary, the detonation of atomic device by the first non-white, non-Western, and so-called undeveloped power, namely the Chinese People's Republic, opens new vistas of exposure of vast multitudes, the whole of humanity, to insidious terrorization by the ever-present threat of annihilation. The fact that most of the time human beings put the truth about the nature and risks of nuclear war out of their minds because it's too painful and therefore not acceptable, does not alter the nature and risks of such war. The device of rejection may temporarily cover up anxiety, but it does not bestow peace of mind and emotional security. So man's proneness to engage in war is still a fact, but wisdom born of experience should tell us that war is obsolete. There may have been a time when war served as a negative good by preventing the spread and growth of an evil force, but the destructive power of modern weapons eliminated even the possibility that war may serve as a negative good. If we assume that life is worth living and that man has a right to survive, then we must find an alternative to war in a day when vehicles hurtle through outer space and guided ballistic missiles carve highways of death through the stratosphere. No nation can claim victory in an all-out war. A so-called limited war will have little more than a calamitous legacy of human suffering, political turmoil, and spiritual disillusionment. We're seeing this today. We are. A world war, God forbid, will lead only to smoldering ashes as a mute testimony of a human race whose folly led inexorably to ultimate death. So if modern man continues to flirt unhesitatingly with war, he will transform his earthly habitat into an inferno, such as even the mind of Dante could not imagine. I wish this part of Martin Luther King's witness and testimony were part of the national dialogue on Martin Luther King Day. Let us not ignore it. Therefore, I venture to suggest to all of you and all who hear and may eventually read these words that the philosophy and strategy of nonviolence become immediately a subject for study and for serious experimentation in every field of human conflict, by no means excluding the relations between nations. It is, after all, nation states which make war, which have produced the weapons which threaten the survival of mankind, and which are both genocidal and suicidal in character. Here also we have ancient habits to deal with vast structures of power, indescribably complicated problems to solve. But unless we abdicate our humanity altogether and succumb to fear and impotence in the presence of weapons we ourselves have created, it is imperative and urgent to put an end to war and violence between nations as it is to put an end to racial injustice. Equality with whites will hardly solve the problems of either whites or Negroes if it means equality in a society under the spell of terror and a world doomed to extinction. I don't wish to minimize the complexity of the problems that need to be faced in achieving disarmament and peace. But I think it is a fact that we shall not have the will, the courage, and the insight to deal with such matters unless in this field we are prepared to undergo a mental and spiritual reevaluation, a change of focus which will enable us to see that the things which seem most real and powerful are indeed now unreal and have come under the sentence of death. We need to make a supreme effort to generate the readiness, indeed the eagerness to enter into the new world which is now possible. Quote, the city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. He's really saying we need to have the compass of ought to get us from is. We need a compass, a destination of our humanity. That's powerful. It may not have our vision has to exceed our grasp, or we have no direction. And he's giving us the vision. He's giving us the leadership. He's giving us the vision here. We will not build a peaceful world by following a negative path. It is not enough to say we must not wage war. It is, and this is our job. This is the subject of today. It is necessary to love peace and sacrifice for it. We must concentrate not merely on the negative expulsion of war, but on the positive affirmation of peace. And that's in every dimension, our inner, our outer, in every dimension. There is a fascinating little story that is preserved for us in Greek literature about Ulysses and the Sirens. The Sirens had the ability to sing so sweetly that sailors could not resist steering toward their island. Many ships were lured upon the rocks, and men forgot home, duty, and honor as they flung themselves into the sea to be embraced by arms that drew them down to death. Ulysses, determined not to be lured by the sirens, first decided to tie himself tightly to the mast of his boat, and his crew stuffed their ears with wax. But finally, he and his crew learned a better way to save themselves. They took on board the beautiful singer Orpheus, whose melodies were sweeter than the music of the sirens. When Orpheus sang, who bothered to listen to the sirens? Vado, thank you for your singing. But it's us. We have to be. We have to be the examples of the joy of living lives in coherence with the great power of love and peace. We have to be the examples. As one of Martin Luther King's guides said, Mahatma Gandhi, we have to be the change we want to see. So we must fix our vision not merely on the negative expulsion of war, but upon the positive affirmation of peace. We must see that peace represents a sweeter music, a cosmic melody that is far superior to the discords of war. Somehow we must transform the dynamics of the world power struggle from the negative nuclear arms race, which no one can win, to a positive contest to harness man's creative genius for the purpose of making peace and prosperity a reality for all of the nations of the world. In short, we must shift the arms race into a peace race. If we have the will and determination to mount such a peace offensive, we will unlock hitherto tightly sealed doors of hope and transform our imminent cosmic elegy into a psalm of creative fulfillment. All that I have said boils down to the point of affirming that mankind's survival is dependent upon our ability to solve the problems of racial injustice, poverty, and war. The solution of these problems is to turn dependent upon man squaring his moral progress with the scientific progress and learning the practical art of living in harmony. Some years ago, a famous novelist died. Among his papers was found a list of suggested story plots, the most prominently underscored being this one: a widely separated family inherits a house in which they have to live together. This is the great new problem of humanity. We've inherited a big house, a great world house, in which we have to live together, black and white, Easterners and Westerners, Gentiles and Jews, Catholics and Protestants, Muslim and Hindu, a family unduly separated in ideas, culture, and interests, who, because we can never again live without each other, must learn somehow in this one big world to live with each other. This means that more and more our loyalties must become ecumenical rather than sectional. We must now give an overriding loyalty to humanity as a whole in order to preserve the best of our individual societies. This call for a worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concern beyond one's tribe, race, class, and nation is in reality a call for an all embracing and unconditional love for all humanity. This oft misunderstood and misinterpreted concept, so readily dismissed by by the Nietzsches of the world as a weak and cowardly force, has now become an absolute necessity for the survival of humanity. And I'm translating the gender aspects into a more modern one. So forgive me for changing. He was using man, but I know that today, now that we know the need for gender equity, he would have used humanity. So forgive me, Martin Luther King, for changing that one word in your speech. But this word, I'm not changing. God willing, we'll never change this. When I speak of love, I'm not speaking of some sentimental and weak response which has little more than emotional bosh. I'm speaking of that force which all the great religions have seen as the supreme unifying principle of life, the supreme unifying principle of life, that life has a purpose, life is a blessing. We belong on the planet. We're not a mistake. We are an expression from the great mystery that gives life an expression of love. I'm speaking of that force. Love is somehow the key that unlocks the door which leads to ultimate reality. Let me repeat that, because that's what we're here to learn: ultimate reality. Love is somehow, it's mysterious, the key that unlocks the door which leads to ultimate reality. This Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist belief about ultimate reality is beautifully summed up in the first epistle of St. John. Let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. If we love one another, God dwelleth in us, and his love is perfected in us. Let us hope that this spirit will become the order of the day. And let me digress to one of the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, may blessings be upon him, said, if you take one step toward God, he takes 10 steps toward you. The meaning is, if we take a step toward love inside, it is amplified and we are blessed, and there's more of it, and it's never diminished. It's never diminished. As Arnold Toynbee says, love is the ultimate force that makes for the saving choice of life and good against the damning choice of death and evil. Therefore, the first hope in our inventory must be the hope that love is going to have the last word. We can no longer afford to worship the God of hate or bow before the altar of retaliation. The oceans of history are made turbulent by the ever rising tides of hate. History is cluttered with the wreckage of nations and individuals that pursued their self defeating path of hate. Love is the key to the solution of the problems of the world. Let me close by saying that I have the personal faith that humanity will somehow rise up to the occasion and give new directions to an age drifting rapidly to its doom. In spite of the tensions and uncertainties of this period, something profoundly meaningful is taking place. Old systems of exploitation and oppression are passing away. And out of the womb of a frail new world, systems of justice are being born. Doors of opportunity are gradually being opened to those at the bottom of society. The shirtless and barefoot people of the land are developing a new sense of somebodiness and carving a tunnel of hope through the dark mountains of despair. The people who sat in the darkness have seen a great light. Here and there, an individual or group dares to love and rises to the majestic heights of moral maturity. So, in a real sense, this is a great time to be alive. It's our time. Therefore, I'm not yet discouraged about the future. Granted that the easygoing optimism of yesterday is impossible. Granted that those who pioneer in the struggle for peace and freedom will still face uncomfortable jail terms, painful threats of death. They will still be battered by the storms of persecution, leading them to the nagging feeling they can no longer bear such a heavy burden and the temptation of wanting to retreat to a more quiet and serene life. Granted that we face a world crisis which leaves us standing so often amid the surging murmur of life's restless sea, but every crisis has both its dangers and its opportunities. It can spell either salvation or doom. In a dark, confused world, the kingdom of God may yet reign in the hearts of humanity. So let me just close with a prayer that says, may we become the recipients of the blessing, of the wisdom to find the power of love in the very life that we live, in the very breath that we take, in the very consciousness that we have, and to see with eyes that look for and are informed by and remember that the power that gives us vision is a gift from a loving power, a loving God, and the power of touch and the power of knowing and the light of consciousness itself is a gift given to us by a power of love, and that both our life and our passing can be in a journey guided by that power. It's our choice. If we take a step toward it, it will open doors for us. This is not something that is a secret. The wise have all reminded us if we knock at that door, it will open. If we step toward it, it will step toward us. If we open, it will fulfill us. Nothing else fulfills as being empowered by the courage and the clarity that comes from the power of love. That's what Martin Luther King invites us to do. That's the necessity of standing up and challenging the injustice of poverty, the insanity of war, and the horrors of racial, religious, nationalistic pride. May we be the change we know we can see. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. All right, Jonathan. That was amazing. And we did just what we promised we'd do, and offering some insights and now some instructions. That idea, taking that one step, and there'll be 10 more. What you said earlier again, what you said before, which I love, is that the whole idea of loving people and using things, not using people and loving things. I mean, this is the out of balance world that these insights and instructions are being offered to. And we're here with you. And we're here with other people. And Summer, I want to let you respond. So I could tell you were so moved by this. And then we're going to do breakouts, because what you were really saying for me is that, the connection that we have, not only to source and creator, but to each other, can allow for those instructions to actually manifest in the changes that are needed right now. Summer, what do you think about dear brother Jonathan here?
I just want to, from the depth of my heart and always dancing, joyful soul, I want to thank you for bringing Dr. King alive in this day, and through you and your profound life of work that is is love in the universe. And I'll never forget meeting you in person, um, in the Netherlands, right? Yeah.
Yes, in the Netherlands, you gave me a ride in your car, and I
You
saw I saw the bond between you guys, and I wanted to like make it right there. And I
Good.
was it was so out of line, and I just married you. I just did
Yes,
it. I
yes,
said,
yes.
"We got
You
married. You
officially
don't
married.
let this." I was like, "Don't let this slip away. This is gold. This is a golden blessing. The synergy and the blessing and the power of the power couple." And we were in the little car in the middle of the Netherlands, and here, I mean, but we're everyone's crazy, but we're crazy for something that can actually be fulfilled. If you're crazy for power, you'll never get enough. If you're crazy for art, you'll never be done. You're crazy for money, you'll never. The only craziness is the craziness for unity and love that can be fulfilled,
Oh,
and every step we take to do it is fulfilling. So
mm.
I couldn't resist. And I thought afterwards, oh gosh, I may have overstepped, but no, thank God you've proven that it was good and so good. What a power couple you are.
Well, it felt like that was just yesterday, and here we are today. And I just for those of you out there that do not know Jonathan, or that this is your first time, I just want to say, in regard, as a sister and someone that I have watched and witnessed him in what feels like a few years, but it's been many years. I
Yeah.
just really, really always feel um the power and strength and perseverance of spirituality, love and action, and truth telling there through you. Like, I just really want to, like, from the depth of my heart, like, thank you for who you are. And I felt when you were saying, Dr. King, please forgive me. I was witnessing his spirit, like, laughing, that, and I just wanted to make sure that he doesn't even need to. He said, "Please, like, tell him I forgive him." Um, and like, but I, on behalf of so many of us that are trying to do our best right now, and there is a relevance so deeply with Dr. King, and I wonder, for you today, Jonathan, and what's unfolding in the world, how do you feel Dr. King is speaking to you today?
There's if you go to the Global Security Institute website in the newsletter we just did, there's a link to a discussion I had with Clarence Jones.
Mm,
Now, just let me digress. One of the hats that I wear is I'm the representative to the UN and a senior advisor to the summit of the Nobel Peace Prize winners. So there was a press conference in one of our summits in Paris, and I was the presiding person, and there was Willem de Klerk, Gorbachev, and people easily identified. There was an elderly black man sitting next to me, and I said, "Who? I don't know you, and I have to introduce you. Who are you?" He said, "I'm Clarence Jones," and I said, "Well, I don't know you." He said, "I said, why are you here?" He said, "I'm representing Martin Luther King's foundation because I was his speechwriter and lawyer." So I thought to myself, "Oh, it's your God." you know, because I really believe that Martin Luther King was inspired by the divine, and that his words of instruction are very clear. We need to heed them, and how they are heeded. There's no formula. if your intention is to fulfill the qualities that he articulates on these issues with a spirit of human unity, without, as Rumi said, somebody asked him, "What do you get from praying? What do you get?" He said, "I don't get anything. I lose pride. I lose vanity. I lose ignorance. I lose prejudice. I lose anxiety. I lose fear. I lose I lose ignorance." Our natural state is what Martin Luther King is invoking in us.
Mhm.
And when you're in the natural state, you're in the flow of the real. And then what comes before you is what you have to respond to. I don't need to tell people here that we have to make sure that fascism doesn't take over America. I don't need to tell people here that we can't have third party candidates ensuring that a fascist dictator becomes the president of the most powerful country in the world. I don't have to tell people that. I don't have to tell people that the Russians are using social media to amplify divisiveness in our society. I don't have to tell people here that identity politics divides and unity based on humanity and love prevail for success. I don't have to tell people here that human security has to take preference over the myopia of national militarism. I don't have to tell people here that science matters in understanding the world, but doesn't help us necessarily in understanding our core humanity. I don't have to reiterate that what opens up understanding for each circumstance is, what does love do here? What does compassion do? I don't have to tell people that. What I do have to say is, we need cheerleaders. We need each other. We need to cheer each other on. We need to be amplifiers of virtue in others. We need to care for the success of others and understand that the greatest fulfillment is in caring for the success of others. Then you find success. That's how it works. That's how it works in business when you're providing goods and services. It's how it works in all of the professions. And that's how it works when you give somebody a glass of water. It's a change, as he says, as Martin Luther King said, a change of attitude, a change of focus. That's the best advice that I'm giving myself. And I'm a lot older than I look, and I've been experimenting with it for many decades. And I can tell you that the perennial teaching of the wise of all traditions works. But this is unique. This is unique. The first admonition is always to uh, to love others as one loves oneself. That that to see humanity as one. Right. Uh, that has always been a spiritual admonition for personal growth. We're now in this unique moment in human history where it's become a practical necessity.
Mm.
We can't we can't deal with protecting humanity from viruses with a vaccine apartheid world, because the virus will mutate somewhere, and it's smart. The virus has figured out that it doesn't need a passport. And we're seeing all sorts of flus and viruses coming around that we didn't have before. It's largely because of our the Anthropocene, our impact of science and technology on the natural world. Can't be solved at a national level. 60% of our oxygen comes from phytoplankton. Can't protect the oceans. It doesn't matter how powerful your nation is. It takes all the nations, all the peoples of the world, because we're all breathing the same air. We're all breathing the same air. We're all breathing together. That's a reality that the spiritual insight lets us know. Our institutions have to reflect reality. We have to become real. You cannot protect the climate at a national level. So, this insight of our personal being woven into the web of life has now become a practical necessity to protect the web of life. Because if it unthreads, we unthread. When we weave it together, in the Jewish tradition, it's called tikkun olam, weaving the world together. Religare is religion, bring it together. Bring it together. That's what we have to do. And this group of people listening and the Unify Unity, we're the people who are touched by this core message of unity. I would venture to say that many, many people listening to this have been gifted the insight of unity. They've been gifted a taste of real love, of unconditional love. And my teacher, a great Sufi Bawa Muhaiyaddin, used to say, if somebody is touched by that, they're forever good. They're forever good. They're forever good because they'll never, ever sell anything for that. It's
Yeah.
sovereign. That taste of love at that level is sovereign. It's gold. You don't have to polish it. You don't have to embellish it. You don't have to do anything. It it will do it through you.
Mm. And it is. And we're here. And we are finding each other. And love is leading the way. So, Jonathan, Summer, let me tell you what I'm thinking we're going to do here. So we're going to keep the live stream going. And we can keep this conversation going. But we want to give everyone a chance to engage with each other and connect with each other. So we're going to open these breakout rooms. But we'll keep the live stream going. So I'll stay in here. Summer, you're free to either join, you're a co-host. So the way Zoom works here, while we're just learning this, I'm going to open rooms. There will be 4 or 5 folks in each room. And Jonathan, if you have some thoughts, I want to give people, to talk like a talking circle we've been doing, which is great. But if there's any guidance in terms of a recommended conversation or question to ask as a group to help, again, deepen the insights and strengthen our capacity to bring love into form in the world.
Well, let people ask their questions. I've spoken quite enough.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's see how we've been moved by what Jonathan had to say and I think of it as a dialogue and a discovery session. So people are going to discover stuff and we're going to be looking forward to hear from them. So I think what's happening, if I get it right, you guys, if I did it, you should just be able to go to a room. Did I do it that way? People are moving. It is happening.
No, I don't see that how do I join
You're a
one?
co-host. You're a co-host. So we're still got the live stream going where
Um,
most people are engaging with us. If you want, come into the room. I'm saying that to the live stream audience. Since you were made co-host, we're stayed back in the main room.
okay.
So now, if you want to go into a room, which you can do, but someone needs to stay here to keep the live stream going. And I thought, Jonathan, if you
John, you should capture the chats. I personally want to read it, read them later. But they're not just shout outs. They're quite insightful.
Mhm.
yeah.
I mean, they're exceptionally responsive and really, really intelligent.
Well,
You
here's the
know,
thing, just as your Zoom coach. So when you're looking in that chat, at the very bottom where you would type a message if you wanted to, at the
yes,
very bottom, there's 3 little dots
yes.
below that. If you touch that, you can save the chat and it'll put
Oh,
it into
oh,
your
wow.
computer.
Okay.
So you'll have it.
Where would I find it?
It's goes to like, what do you want, a Mac or a PC?
A Mac?
Yeah, it's probably just going to go into your Finder, like in your downloads.
What would I call it? Chat?
It does it. Yeah, it puts. Let's see what they call it here. Automatically.
So everybody listening can capture these as well because the dialogue is very intelligent. It's really worthwhile.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we had Patricia Ann Davis on yesterday from the Love Currency Embassy, and she also worked with Dr. King's Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, and she said such profound things. So she reframed his use of nonviolence to be peacemaking, putting it in the affirmative.
Uh-huh.
You know, and but she talked about how he stressed the importance of timely action,
Uh-huh.
and we really were getting at what's keeping us stuck. And
Silos. identity rather than principle. That's what Clarence Jones emphasized in the dialogue with him. And he really, you really sense that this man carried the transmission of Dr. King. He was basically, he, I mean, Dr. King lured him in as a lawyer, but he became far more than that. Um, and you just felt the vibration. But his main thing was finding our common ground. And we're not, we shouldn't bemoan the fact that everybody's not going to agree with us. I mean, there's some people who are just not going to. And why that's the case, God alone knows. It's just not our job. But there's a lot of the foundations now, they privilege management by objective projects, the big foundations that fund movements.
Jonathan, 1 second. Let me just tell the folks that are here. There's breakout rooms going on
Oh,
where
well, then
people
I
are
should be
talking.
quiet.
No. Just for a second. Just give instruction, because I
Yeah,
see
I
Deborah's
think
here.
spend more time with Jonathan, so I'd like to stay here if that's
Oh,
okay.
you're welcome to, of course, and
Okay.
Ash and Lynn and Pamela as well. But just to let you know, someone's asked for help here. Okay, Summer, did you see that message? You're on mute. Okay. We're having another person coming in too. All right.
How long do people have in the breakout rooms? I don't see the timer.
I didn't set the timer.
Okay.
Say about another 10 minutes.
I would say longer because there's a lot of people in some of the groups, and
Should
that's
be
not going to
4 to
give it.
5 people the most in the room. Okay. All right. Well, let's keep talking about this. So important. Well, Deborah, let's add you to the conversation here. We bring you in, and Mary has asked for help.
Mm.
I'm going to go to her room and let you guys keep talking here. Remember, there's a live stream going that we're keeping people engaged with. So I'm going to join that room and see what Mary needs. I'll be back.
Um,
Can you
John.
imagine there was a popular song, Help? Right? I mean, it's such a great, when you think of it, help, I need somebody, help, not just anybody, help. What a great, I just realized what a fantastic name for a song, help, you know?
Kind of
Uh,
says it all, doesn't it?
my mother sang a song. My mother was a pop singer. The songs that she sang were, one of them was, I'm beginning to see the light.
Mm.
Uh, I'm beginning. The other one was Little Things Mean a Lot.
Yeah.
Um, Besame Mucho, Kiss Me, and Chapel in the Moonlight. I
Mhm.
just realized these songs, the titles of these songs are so amazing. And think of the songs in our pop culture today. My gosh, they lack uplift.
Mhm.
And that song that you played at the beginning of this session, wow, I'm putting that on the Global Security Institute's website for sure. I mean, I'm going to publicize this talk because I really believe that Martin Luther King's roots, the roots of his action are in his thoughts here, and his thoughts are clearly guided by his heart, and his heart, as far as I'm concerned, is guided by God. And so I want people to hear that. I was co-chairing a conference at the Carter Center with President Carter, and I had the privilege of introducing him, and and I said, I wish you were still our president because I believe that your actions, your hands were guided by your heart, and I believe your heart was guided by love, and I believe that love was guided by God. And I introduced him. So afterwards, we were doing a photo session, and I said to him, President Carter, I want to apologize. I obviously overstepped my boundaries in this, public uh, disclosure. Uh, and he looked at me and said, "Oh, Jonathan, it resonated in my heart." I haven't washed my hands since. Uh,
Mm.
uh, that's the leadership that we have had. And I'm questioning why. I know why I haven't been an effective leader, as effective as because we haven't won on so many of these issues. I was wondering, like, how, and I see it across the board. I see where we're not supporting people with leadership qualities in different groups. We're not. And we're leveling everybody to just the principle of equality. That's really important. Everybody's important. But some people have qualities of leadership. And I've just seen in so many organizations where leaders get cut down because they're imperfect. Well, only God's perfect.
Yes.
And there's a culture that just that was one of the strategies that the man who was obsessed with Martin Luther King and obsessed with destroying his leadership, J. Edgar Hoover, was obsessed with it. And if you study the strategy of COINTELPRO, which he created an organization to destroy the progressive movements of the 60s, part of it was ensuring that leaders could not emerge.
Hmm.
And agents were put in organizations for the purpose of taking down leaders. I don't know if that's still happening, but I have observed so for example, the Me Too movement. The Me Too movement is a movement that demands gender equity. That's correct. But who are the leaders? There have to be leaders, but we don't see them, which means that the people in the movement are not promoting their leaders.
Hmm.
Because there have to be leaders. I mean, there is a movement, and it's a good movement. But who are the leaders? And this is a serious issue culturally. And this group, John, that you are helping to lead in a leaderless way,
Yeah.
uh, 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 could really use some more public spokespeople.
Well,
Now, it's just let me
yeah,
just finish.
yeah,
Having said that, my political mentor in life was Senator Alan Cranston, and Senator Cranston carried with him the poem by Lao Tzu that talks about leadership being the best leader is the one who at the end of the day, not the leader that's feared, is honor people, they will honor you, and then it is the best leader is the one who at the end of the day the people will say we did it ourselves. But when Alan ran for Senate, he put his poster up all over the state of California. He was the whip of the Democratic Party. He used celebrity when necessary, but he never allowed it to temper his qualities as a humble human being. He was a wonderful, inspiring leader who, by virtue of his leadership, empowered other people to become active. I'm a recipient of that kind of leadership. So, leadership per se, I have experienced, is not necessarily destructive. But we have a culture now in which I've seen leaders uh, demeaned,
Hmm.
and that so maybe advice in this group, which is people involved in lots of things, find leaders, empower them to lead
yeah,
in all of these different movements that are there, and then that will be that's really necessary. It's just necessary,
yeah,
not,
yeah.
not deep
Well,
insight, but it's necessary.
yeah. Well, and it's hopefully being experienced by you right now, because the very definition of leadership for me follows Gans's idea that accepting responsibility for enabling others to achieve purpose in the
Ooh.
face of uncertainty.
Well, could you post that?
Now, I'm doing that for this guy I know and love called Jonathan Granoff, who has got this story of human security and spirituality combined at the most important moment, because you're right, nation states are failing us on these issues. Terrorism, add to the list. And we're going to have to do something different. We have each other, though. This medium, for me, is so potentially the answer to so many of the real core issues. So that I agree with you. And I try to find that leadership balance, because the good news for me, Jonathan, personally, is that I don't need the credit.
Yeah.
That's not motivating me. I have everything I could ever ask for. I have summer. That's now a sign from God telling me I'm doing the right thing. I met her playing the compassion games. So I'm totally willing to live out whatever breaths I have in service of other social innovators that are doing amazing things, like Hereditary Chief Phil Lane, like Ben Bowler. Do you know, Uncle invited Jonathan, Ben Bowler, and I, top of the world, and we went there, and I wrote my vows. And Jonathan, you influenced the last part of the vow about the scent is part of the rose, inseparable, and oh my
Ah,
God.
it was so beautiful. So
Yeah.
beautiful. It's still
That we
still
love each
almost 6
other.
years later, those vows are so alive every day, you know? And thank you for assisting and husband in those vows and where the, yeah, where the ice, this wait,
It was to melt the ice in the heart of humanity.
yes.
Tell
That's what
about our witness of what we saw when we went up above the polar ice cap. It's
I
relevant.
made me
We,
cry.
we, we saw something that other people haven't
It made
seen.
me cry.
They've heard about, but we were witnesses. Tell about it, please.
Well, Uncle, I mean, this is his home and has been in his family for so long. And he's been calling out for so long to say, pay attention. Look here, the ice is melting. The ice is
Well,
going.
uncle is an Eskimo and Inuit elder. He
Yeah.
is a wisdom keeper of the traditions of his people who have lived in harmony with the natural world for 40, 50,000 years, we know. And he knows that he's the last generation because climate change has caused massive amounts of mosquitoes to go there, and they're destroying the caribou. The caribou were part of the lifestyle that they lived. That and the caribou herds are diminishing, and they can't survive. In addition to the literal melting of, just tell them what we saw. I mean, it, it was overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah, it was overwhelming.
But
And
share that with people. Tell them what we
I'm
saw.
crying. You're going to get me crying again. I'm serious. That was the experience. It was like, oh my God. And what do you do when you see something like that? I mean, literally, I mean, we were out and he took us to where it used to be like this and now it's like this. And there's no question, and the idea that there's even doubt is so
Well, it
painful.
was what he took us to was we saw that he said that this in his lifetime this was 3 miles high, 3 Mile Island, 3 miles high, and you could see that it was just maybe a few feet or nothing, and there were rivers of pure water that size of powerful rivers teeming. I saw hunks of ice the size of office buildings crashing into these rivers. The
Yeah.
sound, the scale of it. And I thought to myself, if 150 years ago, a bunch of people got together and said, let's make a plan to melt the polar ice cap, people would have said, that's impossible. We don't have the technology. It's crazy. Why? How could you do that? And yet, even as we speak today, there's at least $5 trillion of benefits to the fossil fuel industry by governments privileging a technology that is systemically melting the polar ice cap. And we've not only figured out a technology, but we have a social technology that drives by profit motive and privileges industries that are melting the ice cap. And I really didn't grasp the magnitude of it till we went there. I'd like to share something about the spiritual lesson that I had in that, but I want to highlight that we went there as witnesses to this, and it was rugged. There wasn't running water. It was cold. We slept on the ground, was the tundra. It was not comfortable. If you went to take a piss at night, you got covered with mosquitoes. The food was not very good. And it was and we weren't prepared for it. We weren't dressed for it. It was very, very challenging. But it was the lesson was well worth it. We went from there as a group, as an interfaith group, to Assisi. Remember, we went to Assisi. And we went to the shrine of St. Francis, who exemplified the highest level of environmental responsibility. And our message was stop melting the polar ice cap. Let's learn the technology of St. Francis and melt the human heart.
Mm.
That was so powerful. I'd like to share the particular lesson that I had. So this interfaith, it was the Peace Pledge Initiative. This interfaith initiative. Uh,
People are going to be coming back in a minute. Just
okay,
so
this interfaith initiative was based around a pledge to put loving kindness and compassion above before our differences of rituals, practices, dogmas, identity, beliefs, but to be guided by these values. And it was interfaith. And for me, the divine power is formless, infinite, and not bound by space and time. Doesn't have a form. But for Uncle, who was part of it, the natural world is part of the divine body. It is sacred. I didn't go there with any sense of that. I went out of respect for the initiative. So we go there, and he took us to a field that had been under the ice cap for literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. Literally. And the stone now in eastern Pennsylvania, there are granite fields of stones from the Ice Age, and all the stones are the same mineral quality of granite. That's what they are. But at the above the Arctic, these fields of stones were all different, and they were beautiful. I mean, it was like going into Tiffany's. They were like gems. They had different colors and geometric shapes and different layers of colors. They were so beautiful, really beautiful. I was struck by the beauty, and I took a handful of the smaller ones and put them in my coat pocket and got in the bus that was taking us back to base camp. It was like a little van, rather, taking us back to base camp. And all of a sudden, my conscience kicked in. I went, "Oh my God, stop the van." And I jumped out and ran back to where I had taken them and put them back where they were.
mm,
And I felt for the first time not just the beauty of the natural world, but the gift of it. That not that it is God, but it is a sacred gift, and that I'm part of it. And if I impair it, I'm not respecting the gift. And I experienced that. And I didn't, I mean, and I only experienced it because I'd taken the step forward to honor this other religious perspective, this other way of understanding God. And I gained so much from that. I didn't understand nature as God, but I understood nature as a gift from God.
mm.
And now I understand that our degrading this gift is like telling God, it's not good enough. What you gave us isn't good enough. It's just not good enough. So we don't care.
Hmm.
We don't care. It's, yeah. So part of my activism is is motivated not to change the world, but to serve the giver of the world. Because I can't change the world, but I can have the privilege of serving.
Hmm.
That's enough, more than enough.
Well, beautiful. Let's do some of that right here, right now. We've got folks who just came back, who got up this morning, decided they wanted the insights and instructions inspired by Dr. King for this time. We've been finding each other and connecting in conversation, and I'm curious what's happened. If someone feels moved, I'm sure there were discoveries being made in those conversations. We have access to each other. Jonathan's here, we're all here. So if something is on your heart that you want to share, you feel called to, here's a moment. Let's invite that into the room. What
Just
happened?
if I could, the one thing that we really touched on a lot, I thought in our breakout room that is so important. First, Jonathan, let me say thank you. I could not wait to get here to hear this, because growing up, I always went to church, and called myself a Christian, and all the people around me called myself Christians. But we practiced nothing that was in the book. And for me, it is really important that that I don't have to tell you what I am, that you can see what I am by what it is that I do. And one of the themes that I thought was in our breakout group that is really important is that I don't have to change the world. I just have to change what I do and how I engage with one person. And by engaging with that one person and they engage with another person, right, that could become billions of people and we could really change the world. And I just think it's important that not only do we change the way we deal with one another, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but after years of thinking about the earth, that if we do not change the way we engage with this planet, we are not going to have a place to live. And just thank you again, John.
Mm. Wow. Thank you, Bill. You want to
Wow.
comment, Jonathan? Yeah. Who was speaking up there? Someone
I
else.
I was just hoping I could just say something.
Yeah, you may. Absolutely, Claire. That's why we're doing this.
Okay, well, because of what was just said, and also in our group, everybody was from Native group, Native Americans, and I'm so into that whole topic and feeling that speaking circles and grief circles are really appropriate. And I've met Chief Phil Lane, but I also wrote a book called The Call of Mother Earth: How a Being of Light Draws Forth Humanity's Response. And it's all in dialogue, and this Mother Earth can't do anything without help. And the the being of light comes down and shares with villagers how each of them can just express their love and appreciation for Mother Earth, and that will help heal her. And so the story goes that she does feel more healed, and then she gives her message. So when, this man that just spoke about our treatment of Mother Earth, and so did John, everybody's so aware of the healing of all of our planet and all of us. So my way is writing books, but I haven't really been able to get them out into the world much. And that Call of Mother Earth book could be acted out as people sitting in a circle and taking parts, or children acting it out as a play, or turned into a film. I have a friend that might know the right person to send it to. I just sent her my books. So I'm just excited to have met, to have listened in. It was a big, big, wonderful chance to hear that beautiful talk that John just gave. Wow, I hope it's recorded. I mean, I would like to share this with other people and not have, I might have missed the very beginning.
So, Claire, I have
Yeah.
good news for you.
Okay.
Let's just pause for a second. Let me tell you what I see happening here. So it's Jonathan Granoff, right? And it was Bill Houston who spoke before you. Because part of what we're doing is we're going from being strangers to becoming friends. And we're going from friends to becoming kin. It is a family here, right? And we're doing that in one world where we could stay connected. And where social innovators who brought their gifts forward, like yours, can find each other and uplift each other. It's a new pattern of how we're getting to know each other and how we're getting done what needs to happen. So welcome, Claire. I'm going to drop it, or Summer will, a link to One World. You should know about that. And we're interested in learning more about what you're offering. It's exactly in tune with what we're all saying here.
I'll put my email in the chat.
All right, well, this is even better than email. In addition to email, we've got a platform called One World. It's not the only world. We got lots of worlds, but this is one world where we're actually working together to connect to our values with our actions and missions. And there's amazing social innovators that are being uplifted there. And we want to be an ambassador to help your work get out. And we'll talk more about that. So, but I see that, Chris, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just also was in the same room with Claire, and I'm very grateful to Phil Fontaine for having, or not Fontaine, Phil Lane for having previously attended one of my online workshops. I shouldn't say mine. I have a group of people who meet on Friday mornings, and we decided to host an online Zoom meeting for prayer on the second Wednesday of every month. We've been doing that throughout Zoom or throughout the COVID crisis, and it seems to have been quite good. And we call it a spiritual potluck because we want to hear from all different belief systems, all different or no faith systems. And we have Quaker, Mohawk, Anishinaabe, and of course Christian and Baha'i and Buddhist, and all different groups of people that come together and say prayers. We feel that prayer is the initiator of action. So we actually move from prayer to meditation to reflection, consultation, and then action. So it's been a very good experience so far. And having someone come and speak, it would be wonderful to have someone from one world or any of your worlds to overcome the silos that we are experiencing and collaborate so that we are integrating our hearts and minds. In one of the elders of my community, Ngangak Liber, who's an Inuit person, he said the longest distance in the world is the distance between the head and the heart. And we're trying to overcome that malady. Yeah, and thank you, Jonathan. Your talk was just, I'm so grateful for having managed to tune into this very serendipitously today. So Miigwech for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Deborah Robin Meach has something to share. I know that. I can see it. I can see it.
Please do.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Hello, everybody. I was so moved by your presentation and the way that you wove the channeling coming through Dr. King from the 60s up into our present day. And even in your speaking about what you witnessed in the Icelands, the theme is reverence. And when you are describing, what is it that we've lost that disavows leadership, that disavows respect? It's the reverence. And Dr. King just exuded reverence. And you've mentioned a few times the spiritual nature of the human being and the reverence. And I think this is the key. And of course, in this group, we understand that. I did want to hear more about your interpretation of yourself as a not leader, because I certainly see you in leadership here. And thank you.
I don't interpret myself. I think that part of the veil between me and the unity of all is the illusion of being separate, I guess. So it's, so to the extent that I have stories about myself, they're just stories. They're not all that useful. That's why I haven't written an autobiography, because I don't find it that interesting. That sounds foolish. I do, but this is it. Almost all of us have a story with this character called me. Now, this character called me appears in almost everyone's story, right? He just pops up, or she pops up. There's a Greek god called Proteus, who takes multiple forms. I always thought that was me. So the story of me is like a wave that has tremendous value in its uniqueness, in its ability to morph into every one of our different faces, is me. But it only realizes its true nature like a wave when it bows down. And when it bows down in reverence, it realizes that it's actually part of the ocean. So my story, having gotten splashed, is concerned with the realization of being part of the ocean and thus being part of you and everyone else. That's the story that I'm interested in. How do I become so reverential that I can be free enough to splash down to be part of the ocean?
Beautiful, beautiful. And look, here's where the ocean's happening in one world. So I want to show you something here, guys. So I'm here in the weekend of service. I go to the events. And what's going to happen here, this is what's happening. Remember, for the rest of the day, ignore the times because it's showing me in my time zone. But when you go to past events, like I mentioned earlier, the remarkable wisdom from Patricia, all of these that have already been passed, you'll be able to go here and get to the recordings. So the recording to this session, see it says the Zoom meeting, you can watch the recording. So what we're doing now is the way we've organized this so that you guys will be able to go back and share the wisdom of what you're hearing here. And it's been beautiful, Jonathan, to have this time with you. And it's also ours, to hear the wisdom as you've amplified it and to do nothing is just not acceptable.
There was this idea of reverence. There's a wonderful ayat in the Quran where God says, from a man and a woman, I made the peoples amongst you so that you would realize one another. The verb is arif, which is not knowing in object and subject. It's knowing in the way that you realize something. Like if you have a spoonful of honey, you don't know it as you experience it. It's a kind of the experience of knowing. I made the differences in multiple peoples amongst you so that you would know one another. That's the first step in it. The second step is the best amongst you is the one with the most taqwa. Well, taqwa you can't translate. The closest is reverence for the presence of the divine. The best amongst you is the one with the greatest sense of the reverence of the presence of the divine. Then the next one is God speaking in the first person. I am all awareness and knowing, not I'm like Santa Claus. He knows when you've been sleeping. He knows when you're. God is saying, I am within your awareness because I am all awareness. So if you want to find me, go into your own consciousness, go within yourself. I am within your own awareness, within your own knowing. I am closer to you than the jugular vein in your body. I am that which is knowing that you can't know as an object because it is what's knowing. Huh? So that it goes from this step of duality to multiplicity to the presence to unity. And God is saying, well, if you want to find me, don't go looking outside, go within your own consciousness. You can't, you have to have reverence for the peoples of the world, but you have to have realization for the peoples of the world. But if you want to find me, you have to go in. And that's what I thought was so fantastic about Martin Luther King. He gets the Nobel Award and says, we have to go in, which we have to go within ourselves. That's powerful instructions for today. When we live in a culture that's so preoccupied with the external rather than the internal, and this is a community that reaffirms the value of the internal. So even in the founding document of the United States, the vision of the United States, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Okay, so well, first of all, it still remains an ought, but the self-evident part of it is certainly not discoverable on the external. I mean, some people are weak, some people are strong, some people are smart, some people are not, some people are tall, some are short. We don't, from the external belies equality. It shows distinction. So where is this self-evident truth that Jefferson is talking about? It is as it's stated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the inherent dignity of the soul, and it was in the speech that Martin Luther King gave, the inherent dignity of the soul of every human being. Because that's what we are. That's our humanity. Otherwise, we're just stuff. We're just stuff. Not that stuff shouldn't be, like I had this experience of the stuff of the Stones. I know now. Well, the stuff is to be understood as amazing, a miracle, a gift, a secret, a mystery. But the dignity of our humanity is within. That's where we're equal. That's where we're one. That's where the ocean is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Jonathan, at the heart of what we're doing, when we started Compassion Games, the chairman of the Compassion Games is Hereditary Chief Phil Lane. And when I met Phil with the Dalai Lama in 2008, he shared those guiding principles that are summarized starting from within, working in a circle, in a sacred manner. We heal and develop ourselves, our relationships, and the world. And that is at the heart and at the core. Those are the principles that govern our behavior. And that we have the blessing of the indigenous elders and wisdom that's connecting us to the natural flow. Patricia kept saying how Dr. King was just putting it in the affirmative thinking system. He kept reframing it that way. He's a shining example of exactly that way of being in the world. That's why his words are timeless. We're so blessed to have you, Jonathan. It means so much to me to be able to share you with my beautiful kin family here growing in one world.
John, anytime you ask me to join, I'm a yes, as you know. So whenever there's an issue you want to.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, I've taken more time than I asked originally for just a couple more minutes. I see that.
Oh, by the way, I had a terrible flu, and this has got me better.
Oh, I love you for saying that. Thank you.
That's what
Erica, if you could do it in 2 minutes. Go for it.
Hi, Jonathan. It's an honor to meet you. I know from my own perspective, learning that blame serves no purpose, to see everyone as divine creations, and to come from that deepest place of unconditional love. When we love without condition, we view everyone as divine creation. And I said this a little while ago in the breakout room. When you're one person and you're not wealthy, you don't feel any contribution that you can make is sufficient. But I've learned that is absolutely not true. The smallest contribution sometimes makes the greatest impact. To give and to give freely so that others may simply live is the greatest lesson that I have learned within my life. And it's an honor to be here with SINE Network and to be a part of this family. And thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you. All right. There's one more MVC. Oh my gosh. Can you turn on your video? Is that Jeremiah? Who's that? Who's MVC? Okay, let's hear from you.
Good day. How you doing, John? This is Michael Coles speaking.
Michael Coles. Hello, Michael.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. Jonathan, I want to give thanks to you for listening to the Stone people and having an awareness, vibration to be able to be open enough to listen and to do what was right in that moment. I applaud you. People don't understand the relevance of Mother Earth. Everything has a place for it to be and to exist, to contribute to the wellness of Mother Earth. And extraction is one of those things in our world that is destroying and raping of Mother Earth. But on the side of that, I wanted to just share something with you in your relation when you're speaking about the ocean. And I like to read a grandfather quote to you, a grandfather quote. Love is a drop in the ocean, but we are the ocean in the drop. Just I want to bring that around what you were speaking about earlier. Thank you very much for allowing me to share my spoken word today. Again, thank you.
That is pure Sufism, let me tell you. No drop without cloud, no cloud without ocean, no ocean without drop. One drop joining heaven and earth, no life is separate.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yep.
All right.
Thank
What
you.
a great way to bring this to a close. Maybe, Jonathan, since you so were moved by Pato, that we should close like we started, huh? Maybe we
Yeah. Yes, that's
link.
perfect.
I want you to have it. There's no one like Pato Antoinette and what he represents to our community. He'll be hosting the birthday celebration tomorrow. So tomorrow is the day of service, and it actually is the 95th birthday of Dr. King. So it's a special day. This year works out to all on the same day. And that's kicking off then 40 days of peace that's going to end with the beloved community convergence in February. And maybe I'll talk to Jonathan about what we're going to do during this 40 days, how his mission and his work can be advanced, and maybe have him come be a part of the closing beloved community convergence. Well, here we go. Let's close with some amazing music, words of Dr. King.
Yeah. This one is dedicated to the King, Martin Luther King, our civil rights champion. Understand me, no man. And this one is dedicated to all the people all over the world, to every man and woman, every boy and girl, to everyone who believes that equal rights and justice should apply to all, regardless of our color, class, or creed. This one's for Martin Luther King, our frontline soldier, Martin Luther King, our peaceful warrior, Martin Luther King, our civil rights leader, Martin Luther King. This one's for him. Well, just like MLK, I have a dream today. And like Bob Marley, I got so much things to say. Hey, wanna talk about empathy, equity and equality. Wanna talk about ending war and how to end poverty, how to end racial hate and police brutality. Cause where there's no justice, soldier, there can be no peace. Seems like humanity is in a state of emergency. We need more ethical leaders with a sense of integrity, like Martin Luther King, our frontline soldier, Martin Luther King, our peaceful warrior, Martin Luther King, our Our civil rights leader, Martin. This one's for him. You see, there are so many problems, and we need some solutions. Yes, let's get together now and start a love revolution. And we can't stop, no, we can't slow up. We gotta keep pressing on. If you can't run, then walk. Can't walk, then it's time to crawl. He said, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Darkness can't drive out darkness. Only light can do that, he said. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I've decided to stick with love. Hate is too much to bear. He said, you can kill the dreamer, but you can't kill the dream. You see, unconditional love will rule in eternity. He said, the time is always ripe to do what is right. Lord, I hear the voice of Jesus say, don't give up the fight. He said, where do we go from here? Chaos or community, my people. Instead of fighting each other, show some unity. He said, we fight injustice with civil disobedience. So speak up, don't be silent, and always remain non-violent. Yeah, let's work it out, don't fight it out. Come on everybody, let me hear you sing it. Let's work it out, don't fight it out. This one is for the king. Let's work it out, don't fight it out. Come on everybody, one more time. Let's work it out, don't fight it out. Yeah. This one's for Martin. Martin Luther King. Our frontline soldier, Martin. Martin Luther King. Our peaceful warrior, Martin. Martin Luther King. Our civil rights leader, Martin. Martin Luther King. This one's for him. This one's for Martin. Martin Luther King. Our frontline soldier, Martin. Martin Luther King. Our peaceful warrior, Martin. Martin Luther King. Our civil rights leader, Martin. Martin Luther King. This one's for him.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the road, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream. We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
All right. So, beloved community, that's where we're headed. That's where we start. Thanks, everybody. If you look in today's schedule, you realize there's a pause here. We'll be getting together later. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If you want,
John, could I give a closing prayer?
Yeah, I'd love that. That would be perfect.
Yeah, it's important that I honor my teacher, Bawa Mahayadeen, and his teaching on this, because that's, he's my elder, he's my guide. I met somebody who crossed over into the oneness of humanity. So this is what he taught me. His This is his transmission. May God protect all of you. May the goodness that comes from you spread through the whole world. Sow goodness everywhere you go through the seeds of love. Plant these seedlings of truth. Let everyone pick and eat these fruits of goodness. May the grace and the wisdom resonate in your hearts. Let the taste of that honey, the taste of the honey of grace, the honey of wisdom, overflow in your hearts. Jeweled lights of my eyes, may every single living being become this sweet taste and experience the bliss of this taste. May the taste of love increase so that everyone can attain peace and be shown this open path. That is the path of grace, the path of God's love. Please, every one of you, become this. Amen.